My name's Chris Henry, born in Whalley, Bramley Mead, and was raised in Accrington on Park Road. In terms of what's just happened recently, apparently there's history being made. I was the coach to both of the World Professional Snooker finalists, Mark Selby and Shaun Murphy, which is obviously unique. Very special occasion, very special experience.
That's a wonderful achievement for an Accrington lad. So, just to let me get it right, you were the coach for both of the finalists?
I was, yeah.
Is that allowed?
Yeah, it's not quite like football or other sports. I'm actually working with 9 professional snooker players. And it just so happened that Mark and Shaun were drawn in different halves. And they did particularly well that week. Both got to the final, but of course it's going to be very sensitive because I've got to go into each changing room and speak to these guys about playing the other guy. But we don't really talk about strategy of the other player because it's snooker. And there's not really much you can do. It's not like football or other sports. You've got to sit down and watch the other guy play. So my role as in that particular instance as a snooker coach, on-table coach, but also a mental coach, I'm helping these two guys be their best. And there's a few things that we work on in the changing rooms to help them get onto that match table in the arena and perform at their best. And that was my role.
Can you tell me a little bit about your early life in Accrington then? You mentioned that you grew up on Park Road, was it?
I grew up on Park Road, yeah, right from zero. I've lived in Accrington all my life, well, until I moved to Belgium. So I went to St Oswald's School. I think it was De Lacy House Nursery in the centre of Accrington, next to the church in the centre of Accrington. That was where I went to nursery school. Then at 5 went to St Oswald's up Willers Lane, and there till 11. And from there I went to, failed my 11 plus, might I add, and went to, it was Holy Family back then. I think I was in the last year of Holy Family before it switched names to Mount Carmel Science School. So, but yeah, Park Road, and I'm very much into sport, very much into football at the time. I was an apprentice at Blackburn Rovers for a couple of years when I was 15, 16, 17, which was brilliant. Trained at Accrington Stanley as well. Played for their reserve team.
What year was that?
This would be, let me just get these years right now. This is going to be when I'm probably 19, 20, so we're looking at mid-80s, mid-80s, about mid-80s, that's when that was. But I was one of those kinds of people that were good at too many things. You know, I was Northern English tennis champion, played good golf, then I went into snooker. My dad took me up to the Sacred Heart Catholic Club, where there was a table upstairs at the back of the church, and that was my first experience at 9, 10 of playing snooker on a full-size snooker table. But that grabbed hold of me. It was snooker that, I mean, football grabbed me, but snooker really grabbed me. And I know that because I've looked back at some of my books at school, and you can see in my books snooker tables being drawn with balls and working out specific shots. So the snooker side of things, from there I won the local tournaments. I managed to win the Observer Cup as well. That was in '88. So I became a very good snooker player.
Which clubs did you play?
I was playing at the Elite, or should I say Thelite.
That's now North Lancs Training Group, isn't it?
Yeah, Chris Lovell managed to acquire that building. I think it was Warburton's. Was it a Warburton's bakery before that?
Yeah, there's a bakery. It's still called the bakery now.
Well, that was the second Elite. We'll say Elite because that's how we call it. But the first one was the ambulance drill hall on the big roundabout in the centre of town, which is where players like Dennis Taylor and Alex Higgins used to practice. And even before that, it was up above Burton's, the elite club on Blackburn Road. So between the Sacred Heart Club, where I practiced a lot on my own, solo practice, and practicing at the Light, that's where my snooker started.
And what was at Skatecliff House? Was there a club there at the bottom of Ormrod Street?
Yeah, there was I think it was a Riley snooker club there.
Right.
That was another club. I didn't really spend too much time at that club. Obviously went there now and again. But my early years were ambulance drill hall at the end of Union Street, sorry. centre of Accrington.
I think that would have been the place where the Aki Pals used to march and train as well.
That's exactly where they were, yeah. That was the same property, same building, yeah.
So
it's got some history.
There's a lot of history in that town, isn't there?
In Accrington?
There is.
Well, I mean, it's E.J. Riley, you know, I mean, the number one snooker table manufacturing company in the world. We had a factory in the centre of Accrington, and that is actually where I got my first cue. My dad took me to the factory, and there were these boxes full of cues, and there was an older gentleman sliding these cues out, have a look at this one and try this one. And I eventually got a new Dufferin cue, it was, one-piece maple cue. And
Have you still got it?
Unfortunately, I've not got it now. I wish I had. But that's, yeah, Accrington. I've been in and around Accrington. I worked at the Hyman Sports Centre. I was a tennis coach there and lifeguard as well. Just done lots of things in Accrington.
So is that the one at the bottom of Church?
Yeah, it's actually on Henry Street, ironically.
Wasn't named after you then?
No
vision.
No. I need to do a little bit more than that to get that sort of accolade.
No, but I think it's fabulous in terms of the work that you've done to push through. But if we're looking at your childhood and your schooling, and I know you mentioned Holy Family, etc., what were your memories of the school?
Fantastic memories. We had some brilliant teachers at that school. As I've said, I was very much into sport. You know, we had Fred Bentley, John Law, and people like that. Who was my favourite teacher? There was a guy who was teaching mathematics, and he was so witty, so dry, so sarcastic. I think it was Mr. Whittaker. It was.
I remember Mr. Whittaker.
Mr. Whittaker, fantastic teacher. So yeah, it was a really nice experience at school. Although I have to say I wasn't very interested in most of the subjects, and that's probably the reason why I didn't do very well academically. But I did very well in sport. You know, I played football for the school, and we had a brilliant football team. One player that a lot of people will recognise is Chris Grimshaw, who was in my class, and we went on to represent Lancashire. Lancashire schoolboys, with another player from local, Mark Brennan, who went on to play for Ipswich and Manchester City and Middlesbrough. And in fact, I was Mark's best man at his wedding. So lots of memories from Accrington.
Perhaps when people are at school, they don't appreciate what a grounding and it's maketh the man time. Could you maybe just allude to some of the teachers and, you know, did they discipline you, or did they put things into you, or did they help you, or did they nurture you? Can you just talk about that?
You know, it was very strict back then. I mean, for example, on a number of occasions, I stepped out of line, and rightly so, I got punished for it. But I just found Mr. Mulderick, remember Mr. Mulderick? He was very strict. And I think that's good. You need strict people around you. You need to know the lines, don't you? You need to learn some discipline. I think that's a good thing. Mrs. Keane, she was a mathematics teacher. Mrs. Ainsworth, I think there was a Mrs. Ainsworth as well. But Fred Bentley and John Law are the ones that stand out for me. They were brilliant. For example, me and Chris Grimshaw were going for Lancashire schoolboy trials on a Saturday morning, and he got us into his office just before the end of school. He sat us down, and I won't repeat exactly what he said, but I'll tell you what it is, you two guys. You're representing the school tomorrow, and you get out there and you do this, and you get stuck in and show them what you can do because you're both good enough, which was great. It was encouragement, letting us know that we had the ability to get into that schoolboys team, and we did, you know. So it was very disciplined back then. Teachers were tough, you know. They were strict, and I think it did all of us a lot of good.
Can you tell me, after school then, where did you move on to then?
From school, so I left school at 16. I then got a job in a factory in Blackburn, Graham and Brown's, the wallpaper. And basically I stood at the end of a machine for hours on end. These wallpaper rolls came out at the end. I took them, put them onto a stack. My dad said, right, you're going to go and get some, do some work. And I did that for about a year and a half. And I just said, listen.
What did you do with your first wage then?
I bought a Commodore 64 computer. 64 megabytes. Wow. You know, the graphics were, poor, let's say. But I bought a Commodore 64, which I still have, by the way. That was my first salary, and that's what I bought.
So in terms of sport, from working at Graham and Brown, did you keep up your interest in snooker, and how did that develop?
Yeah, actually, when I left Graham and Brown's, I started to play snooker quite a lot then. I was doing bits of work at my auntie's shop, which was Essie's. Essie's shop up on Washington Street was a wholesale tobacconist.
All right.
It was known as Essie's. It was just a normal little corner shop that ended up becoming a very successful wholesale tobacco business.
And did you smoke?
I didn't smoke, never.
Right.
That was my mother. My mother, Sheila, she drilled it into me, if I ever see you smoking, it's serious trouble. And because of that sort of, I've never smoked. I think that's a good thing. I suffer from a bit of asthma anyway, so it wouldn't have been a good idea.
It's not good for sport either.
No, it's not good for sport. So, played a lot of football, played a lot of snooker, and travelled with snooker. But interestingly, at 16, I was playing in a tournament in Blackpool, and my mother was sat next to an older chap whilst I was playing in the final, and it happened to be Frank Callan. And Frank Callan at that time was the coach of Steve Davis, who was the successful player at the time. And he said to my mother, "This guy's got some talent." And she said, "Well, if you want to coach him, we'd love you to coach him." And that's how I got into the coaching. I went for my first lessons with Frank and knew him for sort of years and years and went for lots of lessons. And he was brilliant on the technical side of how to play snooker. So I learned a lot of things from him when I was young, in my teens. So snooker started to become the main hobby type of thing.
And you then turned professional, is that right?
I actually turned professional early 90s. I just had a full season, and that full season taught me that it wasn't for me. I wasn't the kind of character that could commit to the 6 hours of indoor practice, 6 days a week. And I couldn't see myself doing it for the next 20, 25 years. So things changed a little bit, and actually I went on to win a big tournament in Holland in 1988. And that was televised. And from that television final, a businessman watched the final and then contacted me and offered me a contract to coach in his 12 clubs, going around to different clubs during the weeks.
And that was abroad?
This was in Belgium. And so that was when I was 23, 24. And he gave me this contract. He gave me a car.
That was a great opportunity.
Wonderful.
What sort of car was it?
It was a Toyota Camry Turbo. It was a nice car. But what was interesting, this was in Antwerp, because it was Antwerp that I went to first. And Antwerp stands for hand throw. The old story of the giant who cut off his hand and threw it into the river. That's where the name Antwerp was from. Hand throw. He just happened to have a house available. He was a wealthy businessman in a little village called Bruges, which the Flemish called Brugge. So we went to Bruges to have a look around, and I just fell in love with the place. It's the most beautiful little city. If you've never been, you need to go. Bruges is beautiful. So I went there, he gave me this house, I had a car, I had a nice salary, I was travelling around the country coaching for a full year, and that was in 89. But then my mother became very sick, and unfortunately in 1990 she'd had a cancer at 60 years of age. So I came back at that time, and then spent a few years back here with my dad, Thomas, which is another interesting story. I don't know if you know about my dad.
No.
He was a singer, so he appeared on Opportunity Knocks with Huey Green, and his brother John, who was a bass. He had a very good bass voice. And another local guy, Tony Flanagan. He's dead now, but he was a tenor. So the three of them, they were called the Henry brothers, Henry singers. And my mother introduced them to Huey Green live on the programme. We've got the actual audio still of it. And Huey kept saying, Oswald where? Oswald Twistle. That's where they were from. And my dad was a Gobbiner, born above the library.
Oh, the lamppost in the library.
Yeah, he was born on Stanley Street in Oswald Twistle. So he was an Aussie boy. And they did very well. They actually came second. It was a clapometer.
I remember it.
You know? So they came second, they did well, and they actually got offered a contract by the programme to come and work for the actual programme as singers. But they're very well known in the local area for singing at weddings, funerals, functions, that kind of thing.
So after the few years when you came back, how did you move back into sport again, or did sport never leave you?
No, sport never left me. So what happened was, back in '93, I went back to Belgium. I was doing some work for an American company, and they were expanding into Europe, and I had lots of contacts in Europe, so I went back into Belgium, got involved in that sort of expansion, and met Marianne, which is now my partner. And we have 3 girls in Belgium. So back in '93, literally went to live back in Belgium, and have been there ever since. I've been living in Bruges, which again, as I said, is a beautiful place to live. And then started doing coaching again of snooker in the 90s, which led on to working for the first time with a professional, which was Jimmy White. In 90.
Is that a challenge?
That was very interesting. That was back in '96, and I had a full year and a half with Jimmy. Wonderful guy, brilliant guy. But unfortunately for me at the time, he wasn't as dedicated, probably as he is now. He's incredibly dedicated now. If he'd had that sort of dedication back then, I'm convinced he would have been world champion. So that was my first taste of working with professional players. And then that led on to working with Peter Ebdon, and I managed to coach him to the world title in 2002, which was the first success, if you like. But what happened back in '88, '89 was something very interesting. I played in the quarterfinals, non-televised, played very well. Played in the semi-finals, non-televised, and played particularly well. And got to the final against a guy from London who used to practice with Steve Davis. And in this final, the match started, and I was that nervous. I couldn't hold my cue properly. And for the first 2 frames, could not get the balls in the pocket. And that fascinated me. What is going on in here to make me feel so anxious and so nervous? And it's actually affecting me physically, so that now I can't actually perform to the level that I know I can. Frustration. I managed to recover. I did a little bit of what we call now catharsis in the toilet. I went crazy in the toilet in the mirror. What the? And I changed my state, fortunately. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was that angry. I managed to change my state, and eventually I won 5-4. If I didn't win 5-4, I don't do the interview. The businessman in Belgium doesn't see the interview. I don't get offered the contract. I don't meet Marianne, and I don't have children with that particular person.
So it all came from that mindset.
Yeah, that was incredible. So I wanted to understand what was happening in my brain to make me feel like that. And that's why I got into the neuroscience angle of psychology. I went to America on lots of courses to understand what chemicals and what neurotransmitters are firing and how that affects us.
So even though you didn't go to university, you then felt compelled enough to actually travel the world to learn?
I did. It's interesting, since school I've been studying non-stop. I've been reading books, I've been listening to courses, I've been, lots and lots of personal development people like Dennis Waitley, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins.
Do you think you were just too young at school then to embrace?
I just, I couldn't concentrate.
Or were the buttons just not pressed at school?
No, nothing really fascinated me enough to really want to concentrate. And I think that's the key with learning. If it's something that you're really interested in, you'll learn it. You'll do it. If it's something that you're not, some kids obviously can adapt. I couldn't. I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't concentrate. And I was a poor student at school. No,
but you excelled at sport, etc. So there's lots of positives there. You've carried that on to your career, haven't you?
Oh yeah, and represented the Holy Family of Mount Carmel at football and basketball and badminton and lots of different sports. In fact, Chris Grimshaw was my partner at badminton. We used to have a lot of fun. I think we were unbeaten. We were really good at that game. So I've studied since school massively. I've got into a position now where I've got a lot of knowledge about the things that I want to have the knowledge in. And I'm using that knowledge now to build a career.
Well, we're hearing an awful lot in business and in society in general about well-being, anxiety, but it just makes me think there's a real challenge in society with COVID, post-COVID, where do we go? And whilst there are services set up for people who need help, does that cover everybody? Does it cover the people that are maybe think they're strong enough and they don't need help, but they really do need help?
Absolutely right, yeah. I mean, the fear in people with this COVID-19 and the way that people have been locked down. I mean, we're social animals. We like to be around other people. And that's been taken away for now probably, 15 months. And lockdown is a tough thing for a lot of people. I mean, it really is. It's not a good thing, and sports missed it. I mean, look at how sports suffered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of these big sporting events with no crowds.
I know.
Snooker is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's now become a forebearer of getting things back together. The Crucible Theatre was full on the final 2 days, which was wonderful. And on that organisation, World Snooker and WPBSA have done a brilliant job to keep the season going. But as you say, the mental side of things, and this is one of the things that I'm going to be doing going forward, I have a process that I use with the players called neural rewiring. And I have a company in Accrington called Neural Rewiring Limited. And that is basically a neuroscience-based subconscious approach to literally changing your brain to produce better thoughts automatically, and that's the key. Because around 90-odd percent, 95, 97% of our thoughts are happening automatically. And what happens with a thought, it basically, there's neurons coming together with a synapse gap. It creates a chemical that starts to make you feel the way you're automatically thinking. So for me, you've got to change your automatic thoughts. So we use what's called neural rewiring. Mark Selby's been using it now for 11 months. Shaun Murphy's been using it for a few years. And I've been working in professional golf. Lee Westwood is a client. Rafa Cabrera Bello won the Scottish Open Rolex Series. Joost Luiten, Dutch #1, he uses neural rewiring as well.
So are these virtual courses that these...
I do both. Obviously, in recent times, I've been doing a lot of online coaching. Because on the mental side, it's pretty straightforward. There's no real barrier to that. Obviously, the physical side of coaching snooker is not easy, but due to my new product, which I'll mention in a few minutes, it's made it very, very easy for me to coach Mark, Shaun, and other players around the world at distance, because this thing is very good at identifying and demonstrating the faults that players are making.
It's interesting, I read an article over the weekend about footballers taking penalties, and the best ones are on autopilot when they're taking them. The ones that think tend to miss.
Well, here's the thing: when you consciously start to think about something, the habit that has been programmed to do it automatically, like driving a car, is interrupted. The messaging is interrupted. You've basically got a little piece of software in your brain for driving your car. You can literally now think about something else, drive your car, not remember the journey, arrive at a destination, and the subconscious has driven that car for you. Through repetition, you're creating this software. You then create the software. The software is connected to your muscles by axons, and it starts to run on autopilot. And when you allow that to happen, because it's wired to do it, that's when you perform at your best. But you need to be in the right brainwave state to allow that communication to happen. Basically, it's alpha brainwave state or theta. If you're in frustration mode or angry mode, in beta, this starts to get switched off a bit like a radio channel, gets untuned, if you like. The communication changes, and then you've got to start thinking about it. That's when performance changes.
So your amazing Accrington business, is this a new product that you're bringing to market through the business?
Yeah, this is a product owned by the Accrington company. It's called The Balls. So of course, Chris, everybody's talking about Chris Henry's The Balls. It's on basically it's 2 snooker size, 17-gram snooker balls. Now, the question is, why would you bring 2 lightweight snooker balls to the market? And I'll very quickly explain the reason why. These 2 are identifying the 2 major things in snooker. Accurate cue ball striking and accurate cue ball aiming. But it's in a very tight tolerance. Okay? Because it's very light, if you don't quite strike this ball where you are intending to, it will very, very quickly demonstrate that you're being ineffective in your striking. In other words, you're not sending that to the target where you think. This one is a light red, and you're hitting a normal white onto this red to pot it in the pocket. But what this does, it identifies your aiming. And what we've established, and what I've established, is something that's never been taught before, is that the visual cortex part of your brain can sometimes distort. And players can literally aim to miss the shot, but they're consciously unaware of that aiming. They think they're aiming to pot it. So Mark Selby, for example, when we used this with him, he said, I've got something wrong technically. So what we do is we put it on the brown spot, and say, right, Mark, just hit that into a far black corner pocket at medium speed. And if you can get that in there, you are striking where intended. And there's nothing wrong technically. And he smacked it in the pocket, and he cracked it into the other pocket, and we said, wonderful, technically very, very good. But then we put this on the table with a normal white, and he couldn't get it in the pocket. So we identified that he was aiming wrong. Through conscious override of doing it slightly different, you've got mechanics and visuals, and slowly they start to coordinate. And that's what's happened to Mark Selby over this last 10 months. Of course, then his confidence returns and his self-belief starts to change, and now somebody that's won the world title 3 times before starts to become that animal again. And obviously he's back to his best again now. But you know, these are like an autopilot on an aeroplane. They keep you on track. If you start going slightly off, this is the first 45 minutes of practice. If you start going slightly off with your striking and aiming, they get you back on track again. So it's helping you develop very good habits, but like Johnny Wilkinson used to do, he didn't kick through the goalposts. He used to practice with a little target in the middle of the goalposts, right? And get habitually good at hitting that small target. So when you take that target away, these goalposts look massive. Okay, and this is what penalty takers should be doing. Practicing in tight tolerances. So it's tight tolerance repetition. So even when you fall out of that tolerance, you're still within the tolerance required to perform on a snooker table. But self-belief is a cluster of neurons caused by repetition via your 5 senses in the subconscious. And that can be designed through repetition.
So is this a product that's available to buy then?
Yes, it's at chrishenrysports.com. We've sold many of these products worldwide already. They're flying around the world. Even the North Americans in America, they're buying these balls now. And the great thing is, we're going to make a bigger version of it. These are 52 millimeters. There's going to be a 57 millimeter version for American pool as well. So we've got lots of clients. You don't just receive the balls, you also get access to all the video lessons online that teaches you what these are, what they're for, how to use them, how to get the feedback, which is the important bit, and then how to fix your problems, basically. So it's pretty powerful.
That's good. One question, if I go to secondary school children, if we're standing in front of a class of 30, and so if I go to Mount Carmel and we speak about you, or we present a video on the success, or we talk about you as an alumni, an amazing Accrington person, the first question the kids will ask is, how much does he earn and what car does he drive? And it's an interesting question because they align success to wealth and cars. And I know as we get older we align it to success in business or family, or being able to choose in your life what you want to do rather than being told. Or
And that's a good question. What is success?
So what would you say success is to those school children?
Success is doing something that you love doing. If you can find something that you genuinely love to do, and if you can also make money with that, that's the goal for me. Do something you're really passionate about, that you want to get out of bed for in the morning, and if you can turn that into an income stream, that's what I've managed to do. And I was taught years ago by Dr. Dennis Wakely, who's a brilliant personal development coach. He was the sports psychologist for the American gymnastics team, sports team. You know, he comes out with quotes like, you know, failure is the fertilizer of success, which I love. You know, failure resides on the far side of success. Sorry, success resides on the far side of failure. You've got to go through the failure to get to the success. And he said, you know, in terms of business, the ultimate goal is to develop multiple portable residual income streams. If you can get to a point where, you know, you're earning money without having to do a lot of work because you put the pieces in place initially, that's where you're trying to get to. And I took that on board. And that's what I've been trying to do for many years now, and it's starting to come together. So in terms of talking to, and I've done 2 speeches at Mount Carmel. I've spoken to the children there. I've done two sessions there, and it was brilliant. The response was, you know, the headmaster said, you know, you probably struggle to keep their attention. Well, I managed to do it for a couple of hours each time. So success for me is finding something that you can really get your teeth into, that you really enjoy. But also, I think there's another key word, and that's being happy. Genuinely happy in what you're doing. And that for me is, again, doing something that you love doing. If you really enjoy what you're doing, you're going to be a happy person. I think it's important to be around the right kind of people as well, positive type people that are going to support you and encourage you. That's important. So in terms of children, can they find ASAP their passion, the thing that they find easy to do and they're really good at it? That's usually what they like doing. And interestingly, you should say that. I do corporate training as well, and that's something I was going to talk to you about. I'm launching a corporate training business for Lancashire. To speak to people about mental side of things, how to feel better about yourself, how to change your self-image, how to change your self-belief, how to perform at your best, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's in sport, it doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff. So this business is going to start soon, where I'll be doing lots of different speeches, but I also want to do an open seminar business where anybody can come and listen to this information, because it's powerful stuff.
Well, maybe we could ask, we run the amazing Accrington Business Leader events. Circa 40 to 50 business leaders come to that, together
Excellent.
with civil servants, etc.
Yeah.
Perhaps with you being an Accrington lad and with us flying your flag and you've been so successful, maybe you could come back and talk to us and help launch that part of your business there, and we could run it as an open forum and run it virtually.
I'd love to do that. Absolutely, and I'd love to do that. Yeah, for sure.
We're hopeful that after the 17th of May we get guidance on when we can do it. So we're maybe thinking sometime in June if you're local.
June, yeah, it's possible that I'll be around. Yeah,
that would be fabulous, because we're keen to give back, but equally not be restrictive or be private. It's about being an open club that people can access, and with well-being and the sort of training that you're talking about, we feel it's quite prevalent at the moment that people need it.
It is. The time is good for it. Absolutely. It's necessary now. There's a lot of people struggling. We know that. But, with some good information and some good education, they can come out of these holes and understand how to do that.
What would you say to people that are struggling? What advice could you give to them at all walks of life? Well,
you've got to understand that everything passes. We're going through periods of different things in life. Everything passes by. It's not going to be around forever. It's going to move along. The worrying thing is lots of people have lost their jobs. That's a worry for them, isn't it? So they've got to try and find a way to get back into it, to some kind of employment. I think that's very important. But they've got to just understand that it won't be like this in 6, 12 months or 18 months. Things are going to start to move back into some kind of normality. And they've got to stay positive, but get into reading some things about positive things, learn some things about, personal development is a brilliant thing to get into. The book that changed my life back in 1989, in fact they've just made a film about it, was Think and Grow Rich. I don't know if you've seen that book.
No.
Think and Grow Rich. And what that book is, it was Andrew Carnegie from Dunfermline who went to America and became very successful in business. In fact, the library in Accrington was a donation from Andrew Carnegie, incredibly. And he took on this young guy, a journalist, and he said, right, I'm going to introduce you to the 500 richest men in America. You're going to interview them all. Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Wrigley, etc., Woolworth. And they're going to give you an hour, and they're going to tell you how they became successful. And you're going to note all this down. What we're going to do is, at the end of that period, which took about 20 years, amazingly, and he didn't pay Napoleon Hill, did it for free, incredibly. He wrote Think and Grow Rich, the 13 principles of success. Things like desire, things like persistence, things like auto-suggestion, how you're talking to yourself. And the problem at the moment is everybody's watching this news. And this news is mostly bad news. And what they have to understand is that when you listen to things and watch things, your subconscious is storing all of it. It doesn't just go in and go out, it stays. So you've got to be on guard to what's going in your mind and be a little bit more careful what information you're taking on board. Okay, get the headlines of the news, but don't get into all the details. Push that to one side and do a bit of reading. Read Think and Grow Rich. Read other things that are out there. There's lots of stuff. James Allen was a genius. As a Man Thinketh. What a fantastic book that is.
Is it on your radar to look at a book then? It must be something you've thought about.
I am writing a book now, and I'm writing a book with my nephew. So my sister, Mary, my eldest sister, which is interesting, she was an Accringtonian, she's owned hotels in Scotland, in Wales. She has a 55-bedroom hotel in Wales, the Tyndale. She has a beautiful boutique bed and breakfast in Gisborne called the Park House, right across from the old church. And she's done particularly well. And my brother's from, obviously, local as well. He's been flying around the world building factories for Tensor and Netlon. But my sister's a doctor of clinical psychology, and my younger sister, she's a doctor of clinical psychology in Watford. She's doing really well. And we had a sister who died at 19 at Park Road, actually. One particular night, she died at 19 from asthma. That was Pauline, yeah. That was tragic for my mum and dad, because they were there. She struggled to breathe. She died, and it was a real smack between the teeth for all of us. We were sort of all down at that time. But it's amazing what you can do. You know, when people say, "Oh, you're from Accrington," it's like a little bit of a, really? Yeah, what's wrong with that? You know, I'm absolutely proud to come from Accrington, and yeah, we've all moved on and done really well.
I think that's what our mission is, to celebrate good things in Accrington and to really get back to basics. You know, let's put ourselves back on the map again, fly the flags, celebrate businesses, successful people.
Yeah.
The sports facilities, the Accrington Stanleys of the world, the David Lloyds, Julie Hesmond-Elshes, just all the great things that are Accrington, and you're one of them. So I'd like to round up just by thanking you for coming today, but just asking you one last question.
Yeah.
What can you give back to Accrington?
Well, what I'd like to give back to Accrington is to help people be better mentally, be better in themselves, help with personal development, with mental coaching, and do some seminars to help people become, let's say, more successful in what they do. I'm a performance coach, but I'm a subconscious performance coach. It's not the normal psychology approach. And there's some brilliant things that they can learn to help them to feel better, first of all, and perform better in whatever task that they're trying to do. So that's something I think I can bring to the table.
That's great. Thank you for your time, Chris, and we're very grateful for what you've given to us today. We'll look forward to that amazing Accrington meeting.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.